Buoy 2 had never given Yara a single bad morning in 4 years, which was exactly why she stared at its keep-alive trace for a long, cold minute before she believed what the board was telling her. That a healthy buoy, on a quiet stretch of chain nowhere near the dark, had begun to drift. Not 2's clock. 2's clock was fine. The line 2 was being measured against had moved. Yara Haddad had tended reach relay arc 9 long enough to know the difference between a buoy in trouble and a chain in trouble, and what she was looking at, on a gray morning at the edge of charted space, was the second kind wearing the clothes of the first. She pulled 2's full diagnostic and read it 3 times. The buoy was healthy. Its oscillator was tight, its keep alive strong, its handshake counter clean. By every measure a tender could take, 2 was the best heart on the chain, and it was failing the one test that decided whether a buoy stayed on the network or got marked gone. The desync test, the network's own judgment of whether a buoy's clock sat inside the tolerance the makers had drawn around their reference. The thing was that tolerance was not a fixed number. She had not understood that for 4 years. She understood it now, the way you understand a thing once you have heard the reference yourself and held it by hand in the worst night of your career. The desync line was not drawn around a clock, it was drawn around the deep timing. The faint, slow, perfectly regular pulse the whole inherited network kept its time to, the conductor at the center of the dark. A buoy was in sync if its clock matched the reference, out of sync if it drifted off the reference. The line lived relative to the pulse. And the pulse was slowing. She knew it was slowing because she had 3 recordings of it now, months apart, and she had laid them against each other in the dark of the sleep shift can and watched them walk steadily apart. The maker's clock was beating slower than it had the last time a human listened, and slower than that the time before, which meant the reference everything was timed against was moving. And a buoy like 2 sitting dead still on a true clock would seem to drift because the line under it had slid out from beneath its feet. The can smelled the way it always smelled. Hot electronics and the sour edge of a recycler filter she had stopped expecting the reach to replace. She sat with the cold mug at her elbow and did the arithmetic. And the arithmetic was the worst she had ever done out here, because it did not stop at her chain. If the reference was slowing, the line was moving everywhere. Not on the 9 chain, everywhere. Every inherited buoy in the sky kept time to the same conductor. Every desync line in the network was keyed to the same slowing pulse, which meant that right now on 1,000 chains she would never see, healthy buoys were beginning to slide toward a verdict of gone. Not because they were dying, but because the thing that decided what dying meant had quietly changed its mind. And nobody knew it but her. The message came in on the certified set 2 days later, which meant it was real reach traffic, which meant somebody upstream had finally, after years, read something she wrote. It was a notice of interview. An authority oversight officer, conducting a cost review of Frontier postings, requested the attendance of the contractor of record for Reach Relay Arc 9 in connection with an open file classified as an infrastructure anomaly. The contractor of record was Yara Haddad. The file, the notice said, contained reports filed by that contractor going back years. Yara read it twice and laughed once, short and not amused. She had filed those reports for years. At the bottom of each one, she had written the same line, in the box for remarks, knowing nobody read the box for remarks. The network maintains a timing reference not described in current documentation. Ask me officially. Frontier reports went up the chain into a silence as deep as the hush, and most days that suited her because the alternative was a licensing office that would quarantine her chain and wind down her posting the instant it understood what she had done to keep it alive. Now somebody had asked, officially, and the somebody was not a comms tech. It was an oversight officer doing a cost review, which on the Frontier was a word that meant closing things. The officer was already inbound. There was no declining an interview with the authority. There was only deciding what you would let them find. Renata Solheim came aboard the can 2 days after that, through the spare docking ring, in a slate blue authority oversight uniform that had never once been near a hot bay. She was tall, late 40s, ash blonde hair going gray at the temples in a regulation knot, with the pale northern look of someone whose ancestors had never seen a sun they liked. She carried a document slate the way Yara carried the spike. Never set down, never far from the hand. She looked at the cable looms and the tape labels and the chipped mug with the flat, assessing patience of a woman who had toured 100 frontier postings and recommended most of them for closure.
Ms. Haddad, Renata Solheim, Expansion Authority, Oversight Division. I won't pretend the seat is comfortable, so I won't ask for one. I've read your file, all of it, which I suspect makes me the first.
That'd track. Most people stop at the casualty line. You want the cold tour or the warm one? Warm one's the same as the cold one, the filter's just louder.
I want the line you wrote at the bottom of 41 reports. Ask me officially. I'm asking. Officially. I have a folder that says, this posting costs more than it returns and should be wound down. And I have a contractor who has been telling the authority for years that the infrastructure is doing something the documentation doesn't describe. One of those things is going to be wrong by the end of the day. Convince me it's the folder.
And there it was, the whole problem, stated in officer's English across the cramped can. Yara could not just tell her. Telling was what the box for remarks was for, and the box for remarks had been swallowed for years. An oversight officer did not act on a frontier contractor's claim about an undocumented pulse coming out of a forbidden dead zone. That was a ghost story. The authority did not fund ghost stories. It closed the postings that filed them.
You want me to convince you? Okay, but first you tell me something because you came a long way and you're the first one who asked, so you've earned a straight question back. What's actually in that folder?
Reports. Yours, 4 of them, going back years. A contact station analyst on a gas giant who recorded something his Sewell catalog called structured like a timekeeper. A station out past the Juno Belt whose core is doing things its inhabitants can't explain. A salvage survey of regions the charts mark blank. Individually, each one is a frontier oddity an oversight division is trained to ignore. I put them in one folder and classified the folder as a single anomaly, because that is the only way the authority's own rules force it to investigate a thing instead of filing it. I turned a closure into an inquiry on a procedural technicality. It is, frankly, the most creative thing I have done in 20 years, and if I am wrong, it ends my career.
Yara looked at her for a while. The officer's hands were steady on the slate. She had not blinked at the word timekeeper.
Huh. So you broke a rule sideways to make the machine do the thing it didn't want to do. Officer, I take it back. You might survive the cold tour.
I did not break a rule. I used one correctly in a way it was not intended to be used. There is a difference, and I will thank you to record it that way if anyone ever asks.
Yeah, there's always a difference, and it's always the part nobody upstairs wants written down. I've got a whole log of differences. Come look at the boards. I can't fix this for you, but I think I can make you hear it.
The trick she had, the only trick she had ever had out here that worked on the deep timing, was the metronome. She had used it twice to save dying buoys, bend a healthy buoy's keep alive into exact phase with the maker's pulse, loud, so a drifting clock could catch the beat and pull itself home. She had used it as a rescue. She had never once thought of it as a witness stand. But a metronome did 2 things, and she had only ever needed the first. It retimed a buoy, yes. And to do that, it had to make the deep timing audible, had to take a pulse so faint no certified instrument bothered to flag it and pin it, beat by beat, to a buoy's heartbeat that anyone could read on any board in the reach. She did not need to save a buoy today. She needed to make a slowing clock visible to a woman who had spent 20 years being lied to by frontier contractors and had learned correctly to discount every word of it. So she would not give Renata a word. She would give her a measurement the officer could take with her own eyes on certified reach equipment without a single thing Yara said being load-bearing. She brought down the reader. It was the one she and Ress had grown in this can from the bones of a dead buoy and the lattice of a dead wrench. The second instrument that had ever heard the maker's pulse, and like the first, it was dying of having heard it. It had done 2 saves. It was warm to the touch now in the wrong way, the way a thing is warm after it has been used past what it was meant for. It would resolve the deep timing at full gain maybe once more. Then it would go on the shelf beside its dead predecessor, and there would not be a third for a long time, because the man who carried the pattern was a month's burn away, and the wrench it came from was gone. She explained none of the grief of that to Renata. She explained the procedure in flat tender's English, because a procedure was a thing an auditor could believe.
Here's what we do. And here's the part where you don't take my word for anything. You're going to run the clock. Your slate, your certified time source, your hand on the stamp. I don't touch it. All I do is bend one buoy's heartbeat onto the reference, loud, where your gear can see it. Then you measure the reference against your own clock, twice, an hour apart. If I'm a frontier crank, the two measurements match, and you go home and close my posting, and I never write, ask me officially again. If I'm right, they don't match, and the gap is the same direction every time, and you'll know it's not my hands shaking because my hands won't be anywhere near it.
You're proposing to let me catch you in your own lie, if it is one. That is either very honest or very confident. Which am I looking at?
Both. Out here, they're the same thing. The dark doesn't care how confident you are, so you learn to only be confident about stuff the dark will back you up on. Get your slate, stamp your start time, watch your own clock catch a thing older than your whole division.
She rigged it the way she rigged everything: tape, patch cable, and refusal. The dying reader cradled at the console where its trace fed the boards. Buoy 5, healthy and near, picked as the metronome, because 5 had done this before, and 5 had liked it. The headset over her ears with the reader's audio bled into the cracked ear cup, the deep pulse rendered as a soft tick, slower than a resting heart, older than the species listening to it. And Renata Solheim's certified authority time source running open on the slate, untouched by Yara's hands, the officer's own clean clock laid down as the one thing in the room nobody could accuse of being a frontier story. Renata stamped her start time. She did it precisely the way she did everything, reading it aloud so it went on the can's voice log as well as her slate, and Yara understood watching her that the woman was building her own chain of evidence in real time, that an oversight officer's habits were not so different from a tender's after all. They both wrote down the moment they broke from the script. Then Yara brought 5 onto the reference. It went the way it had gone before, faster than the first time and slower than she wanted. Tick, trim, listen. 5's beat sat fat and human sloppy on top of the maker's pulse, milliseconds wide of true, and milliseconds were the whole war. Tick, trim. She walked 5's heartbeat onto the song one shaving at a time, the reader getting warmer under her watching, the phase trace closing like a long pair of scissors. An hour to get inside the width of a breath, and the whole time, on the boards where Renata could read it without a word from Yara, the deep timing rose up out of the noise. The conductor at the center of the dark, made loud, pinned to a buoy's heartbeat, legible at last to a woman holding a reach-certified clock in her own clean hand. Renata did not say anything for a long time. She watched the trace. She watched her slate. She took her first measurement of the reference against her own time source, and she read the number aloud for the log, and her voice was exactly as flat as it had been at the hatch, which told Yara more than a gasp would have.
There is a pulse. It is under the keep alive, it is regular, and it is not on any equipment register, including mine. I'm recording that I have observed it directly. I'm not yet recording what it is. One measurement is an anecdote. You said 2.
I said 2 an hour apart. Anecdote's a thing that happened once. You want the thing that's still happening, so we hold the lock, and we wait. And you don't take your eyes off your own clock. That's the whole show, officer. The waiting's the proof. Get comfortable. There's a second mug somewhere. It's worse than the first.
They held it for an hour. It was the strangest hour of Yara's posting, and she had spent 5 of them keeping a dead man's time by hand. The authority officer sat on the fold-down bunk in her slate blue uniform, with her glasses on the end of her nose and her certified clock in her lap. And she watched the deep timing beat, and she asked questions. Real ones, careful ones. The questions of a person assembling a case rather than a person being sold one. How do you know it isn't your instrument? Because I built a second instrument and it heard the same thing. How do you know it isn't the buoy? Because every buoy hears it identically. How do you know it comes from the hush? Because I charted it twice. 2 different ways, years apart, and both times the arrival times pointed at the one place the whole network was built to avoid. Yara answered every question straight and let the lock hold and watched the reader get hotter. She did not tell Renata that the reader was dying. There was no point. It would do this once. This was the once. Near the end of the hour, she felt the heat come off the lattice in earnest. The way it had the first time, the way the wrench pattern always paid for hearing the slow thing, and she knew this instrument was spending the last of itself in front of an auditor instead of saving a buoy, and she found she did not mind. A save kept 8 frontier nobodies in comms for another season. This might keep the whole edge of the sky from being quietly written off by a folder. The hour turned over. Renata took her second measurement of the reference against her own untouched clock and read it aloud for the log and stopped. She read it again. The 2 numbers did not match. The second measurement of the maker's pulse against the officer's own certified clock came in slower than the first. Not by much. By exactly the kind of much that a frontier crank could never have faked into an authority time source she had never let them touch.
Slower. The interval between beats is longer than it was an hour ago, against my clock, which has not left my hand.
Yeah,
In 1 hour.
in 1 hour. Now you understand why buoy 2 is sliding and buoy 2 is perfectly healthy. The clock everything's measured against is slowing down, and when the clock slows, the line that says a buoy's still alive slows with it, and good buoys start falling on the wrong side of it, not on my chain, on every chain, all of them, at once.
Yara had one more thing to show her, and it was the thing she had not said the word about. The thing she had carried in her boot across 3 recordings and never once spoken aloud. She brought up all 3. The first, from the spike, 2 years gone. The second, from the rebuilt reader, months back. The third, taken this morning, before the officer ever docked. She laid them against each other, beat against beat, and ran them together. They walked apart, all 3, and not evenly. The gap between the first and the second was a certain width. The gap between the second and the third was wider. Wider than the same span of time should have made it if the slowing held steady. Yara had checked it a dozen times alone in the dark before she let herself believe it. The clock was not just slowing. The rate of slowing was getting faster. The deceleration was accelerating.
3 recordings. 2 years, then months, then this morning. Watch the gaps. The first gap's one size. The second's bigger than it should be. It's not just slowing, officer. It's slowing faster than it was. Whatever's keeping this clock has kept it steady since before your record existed, and somewhere in the last couple of years it started to change, and the change is picking up speed. That's the part I never wrote in the box for remarks. That's the part I didn't have a word for.
Renata Solheim set her certified slate down on the console. It was the first time she had put it down since she came through the hatch. She took her glasses off and folded them and held them, and she looked at 3 recordings of a thing at the center of a kept silence drifting apart at a quickening rate. And the oversight officer who had toured 100 postings and recommended most of them for closure said very quietly, "The thing an institution is built to never say."
This is not a frontier anomaly. This is the foundation of every comms chain in human space, and it is moving under us, and it is moving faster than it was. I came here to close 1 posting. I'm going to go back and tell the authority it cannot close any of them, because the thing it would be closing them to save money on is the only early warning system anyone has for a problem nobody can fix.
The reader died while they were still looking at it. No drama, no spark. A working thing becoming a warm, dead thing between one tick and the next. The second instrument that had ever heard the maker's pulse going the way of the first. The trace went flat. The soft tick in Yara's cracked ear cup stopped. She reached over and shut it down out of habit, though there was nothing left to shut down, and set it on the shelf beside its dead predecessor and the dismantled remains of the wrench they had both been grown from.
That instrument, was it the only one?
Second one. The first one cooked the same way 2 years ago. They're not built to last. They're built to hear the slow thing once and pay for it. There's a way to make a third, but the man who knows it is a long burn from here and the thing it gets made from is gone. So for a while, no. Whatever I just showed you, you've got the recordings and you've got your own clock's word for it, and that's all there is. I spent the last instrument that could hear it making sure you'd believe it.
Renata was quiet for a moment. Then she picked her slate back up and put her glasses back on and became the officer again, which Yara understood was how the woman carried hard things, the way Yara carried them by logging the clause number.
I will protect this posting. I will protect you to the extent my office can, and I want you to understand that my office can protect a person about as well as a paper umbrella, so do not stop being careful. But I have to write a finding, Ms. Haddad, and a finding has to end in a question the authority can be made to act on. So I am going to ask you the only one that matters, and I need your honest answer, not your frontier one.
She set the slate down again, the second time.
What happens to all of it? The chains, the stations, the people out here who live by them, when the clock stops.
Yara thought about all of it. The chain holding at 8, the buoys on 1,000 chains she would never see, beginning to slide toward gone. The pulse she had charted at the center of the dark, twice by 2 kinds of listening. The skip, on the one night she played the maker's time back loud. The slowing across 3 recordings. The slowing getting faster. And the one true thing under all of it, the thing she had never said because saying it made it real, and there was no fixing it once it was real. She gave the officer the truest answer she had.
I don't know. Nobody does. I've charted that center twice and heard it skip and heard it slow and built 2 machines to listen and burned them both, and I'll tell you the one thing I'm sure of. I don't think anyone alive has ever heard it stop.
She did not say yet. Renata Solheim looked at her for a long moment and then wrote something on her slate and did not read it aloud. The first thing all day she had not put on the log. She tucked the slate away and shrugged her clean slate blue uniform straight and went to the lock to carry a frontier ghost story back up a chain that, for once, was going to have to listen. Behind her on the shelf, 2 dead readers and the bones of a wrench sat in the amber dark, the small museum of things that had heard the maker's clock and paid for it. Yara looked at them, and at the boards where buoy 2 still slid by a hair toward a line that would not stop moving, and she picked up the cold mug, and she did not feel alone with the shape of it for the first time since the night the recordings drifted apart. It was not a fix. Out here it never was. But somebody with a clean clock and a clean uniform had heard the things she heard, and was going to make a machine bigger than both of them at least look at it. And that, at the edge of charted space, under a sky full of old machines keeping slower and slower time to a thing nobody could see, was the most a person could ask.